Okay, this thing's telling me I am live, and I need to get a trailer or something. I know that YouTube's got this feature where you can put like a 3 minute trailer or something. Of course, I watch Ethan Van Sciver's channel. It's like that's like a 10 minute freaking trailer. I need to get me something like that, but yeah, one of these days. It's what I'm always saying. People tell me I need better audio, and I'm like, yeah, one of these days. I got to get a new laptop. One of these days. Uh, so, anything interesting happened this week? Wow. I don't know where you were when President Trump got shot, but I was just basically sitting and watching the computer as I normally am. And yeah, that was a heck of a thing to see. Now, I didn't see it live, I only saw it like in replays and stuff, but dang. That's not something that I was really expecting to see. I didn't have that on my bingo card for 2024. Uh, I mean, considering how the rhetoric's been going, you kind of think that something like that was bound to happen, but at the same time, you didn't really want to think we'd get to this point. And at the same time, we might not have gotten to this point. And that's the really interesting thing about this particular shooting is that a lot of people are blaming it on politics and stuff. And, there are people calling it an inside job. I see NMI Trading calling it an inside job. And then I look at the information about the shooter himself. Now, this shooter was like a 20-year-old guy who had his dad's AR-15 or something. Apparently, he went and he took surveillance of the place via drone a day or two before the rally took place. But he was actually looking around for just about whatever he could find. He was looking for Joe Biden appearances. He was looking for Trump appearances. He was looking for really anything that he could, any high profile event that he could potentially disrupt. This is just stuff that I read today. And I kind of had a feeling when the thing that shocked me at first was finding out that the guy was a registered Republican. Although I don't think that means what anybody wants to give any kind of significance to, because I found out that this guy, his mother is a Democrat and his father is a libertarian, and he's a Republican. It sounds like he was either trying to straddle the fence between the two of them, or he was trying to give the middle finger to both of them, or he was just basically saying, well, this is the party that's in the middle. I guess I'll go with that. I don't know if this guy was politically serious. I don't know if this guy was politically motivated. My theory is that this is a guy who would have been the next school shooter if it weren't for the fact that President Trump came to town. This is a guy who probably had no real political aspirations, but it sounds like he was bullied the hell out of for I don't know how long. Like there were kids at his high school saying this guy was bullied like every day, and probably this guy just had his self-esteem worn down or built up. I don't know exactly what any of this stuff does to you. To the point where he was just like, screw it, I'm going out in a blaze of glory, and decided I'm going to, off myself by cop in the worst possible way. And President Trump's rally gave him the perfect opportunity to do it. Now, what Secret Service had to do with any of this, as far as their dereliction of duty, the problems with not having enough coverage there, not having somebody on that particular roof, all that kind of stuff, that to me is a separate issue. But as far as this particular guy goes, I mean, I subscribe to the lone gunman theory. I don't think that anybody really actually had this guy in his back pocket, and like this was some sort of I don't know, MK Ultra kind of thing. Let's see what other people are saying. NMI Trading. I'm in finance. The DTCC clearinghouse put out a memo stating the markets would be closed if an event happened, and I quote, a death of a former president. The financial markets expected Trump to be dead last week. Also, the Trump stock DJT was shorted prior to the attempt by millions of dollars. Okay, I mean, I don't know if there's anything else that might have contributed to that, but that's kind of an interesting point, bringing that information in from the financial world. So thanks for that. Yeah, I don't know. I look at this particular kid and I just see somebody who is like another one of the school shooter types, and it just happened that Donald Trump was coming to town, and oh boy, if you were if you were going to try and pull a Uvalde or something like that, this one will do you one better. I mean, this one will put you down in the history books for real. I mean, this one did put him down in the history books for real, and that's the sad thing about all these kinds of shooting attempts, school shooters, presidential shooters, any kinds of those things, is that they get publicity. I mean, ultimately, you wind up remembering their names, and and I don't agree with the people who say on media outlets like I'm not going to report on this person's name. It's like, no, it's your job to report the news. I'm sorry, you have to do that. It's sad that people can get publicity in terrible ways, but really, your job is to report the news. You just need to do your job. You don't need to be in the business of censoring things. So yeah, it was just kind of wild though. I mean, and even I jumped the gun. I have to say, that was one of the things that bothered me the most about last week is that I had the opportunity and to jump the gun on things, and I took it because I put out a post at one point that was I said something to the effect of, the Democrats are worried about Project 2020 or the Republicans 2020 Project 2025. The Republicans have to worry about the Democrats Project 20 millimeter. you know? And I thought that was clever. I thought that was cute. And then I found out that the guy's a registered Republican. And I thought, ooh, I jumped the gun on that, didn't I? So I had to pull all that down. And it's just funny because as much as we watch the news already and we think that we're immune from just falling into the default narratives, it's so easy to do. It's pathetically easy to do. You have a story in your head already written, and then the event comes up and it just seems to justify everything that you've been thinking up to this point, and then I'm gonna make sure that everything in there aligns with the story that I've been building in my head so far. And I fall prey to that too. It's shocking to when you realize that you're not immune from that kind of stuff. So yeah, speaking of bad narratives, let's talk about the Acolyte. Oh dear God. Oh man, the Acolyte. I had such high hopes because, I mean, seriously, the whole point of view from Star Wars is really told from the point of view of the Jedi. When you're dealing with Star Wars, either from Obi-Wan Kenobi's perspective or, Yoda's perspective, or just going back into the prequels when the Jedi Order was still around, you really get to see everything from the Jedi's perspective. You never really get to see anything from the Sith's perspective. And of course, part of that is the fact that there's only supposed to be 2 Sith at any given time. But you think it would there were periods back in time when there was more than just 2 Sith. I mean, I don't know how much any of y'all know about Star Wars canon, but Star Wars, the Sith started out as kind of a cult, and then grew into this. It grew into a large body of dark side users, and the problem is that these dark side users could always get together and overthrow whoever the master was, and because of that, you would lose the experience of the master while having all of these, peons who were then squabbling amongst themselves for power. And so there was this guy back in history called Darth Bane, and he said, this is not going to work. This is not going to work going forward, because if the master's always getting overthrown by these groups of dark side users who can pool their powers and overthrow him, then all you're going to wind up is resetting to zero generation after generation. You're going to lose all that knowledge, and then you're going to be fumbling around. Somebody's going to rise to the level of master, and then that person's going to get killed, and you're going to lose all access to that person's knowledge, et cetera, et cetera. So what Darth Bane did after like killing off like practically all of the Sith except for himself, he established what was called the rule of two, and that there would be a master and an apprentice. The master would be the one who embodies the power, and the apprentice would be the one who craves it. And so you would have the master imparting everything he knows to the apprentice, and the apprentice would be able to use that, take what the master knows and also innovate on that, because eventually the master is going to get old and crusty and he's not going to, be up to speed. And then the apprentice will one day kill the master, and then and become the master himself, and then take an apprentice. And by this continual changing out of masters training up their apprentices, you would have a stronger Sith Lord generation after generation. And by and large, that is what took place all the way up through Palpatine. Palpatine was the apprentice of Darth Plagueis, and then he took Anakin Skywalker for his apprentice after killing Darth Plagueis, and so the things. Now, eventually, Darth Vader was supposed to, he probably would have and could have faced off against Palpatine and overthrown him, except for the fact that he became a charcoal chunky on Mustafar. It's kind of like the joke that I told back on one of the May the 4th things. It was what do you call it? What do you call a guy with no arms and no legs who's on your front porch? Matt. What do you call a guy with no arms and no legs who's floating in the river? Bob. What do you call a guy with no arms and no legs who's burned up next to a pool of lava? Anakin. Oh, goodness. WA says, I'm not a fan of the rule of two. I certainly wasn't when I first heard of it. The first time I ever heard of the rule of two was in The Phantom Menace. That's where Yoda says something to the effect of, always two there are, a master and an apprentice. And I'm like, seriously? You're only ever worrying about there being two Sith at any given time, and that scares you somehow? Why should you even be worried about that? I'd be way more worried if there was like a huge batch of Sith out there and you had to be afraid of them, like coming and invading your temple at some point. Oh man, I never really had a fondness for the rule of two either. I mean, I understand it. I understand the philosophy behind it. It just seems to limit things way more than I would have liked, and maybe that's what the people who created the Acolyte thought as well. Let's see. NMI Trading says, I have one unforgivable type of defense on bad content, which is this: if you don't like it, don't watch it. It's the most lazy defense ever. Yeah, true. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, that's fine. I wish there's times when I wish I could avoid some of these things, but unfortunately, that's one of the things that gets my channel some clicks, is the fact that I review some of these comics, and some of these comics are just downright horrible. If I were only reviewing the good stuff, then I don't know if I really have that much to say. I mean, certainly I will come to that judgment at some point in the future. I mean, especially regarding the Rippaverse. I mean, I've got Gooding on the way. I do expect to get Horseman, but Bloodruth, no, I just have really no desire to do that. I've got a Bloodruth shirt on the way just for variety's sake. But for as far as the comic goes, I don't really intend to read that. Unless I'm forced, unless I'm, I don't know, bribed. So don't be surprised if you see me running a live stream saying, hey, I don't plan on reviewing this, but, for super chats, I will. Works for Ethan. So getting back to the Acolyte. So anyway, that's the whole rule of two thing. And apparently they've disrupted that a little bit, although there's always been some amount of fudging in the rule of two. I think that Darth Plagueis, his master, Darth Tenebrous, actually was he had a another apprentice called Darth Venomous or something, and Plagueis and Venomous wound up fighting. So there have been times, and what was let's see, Darth Maul was actually not supposed to be a Sith apprentice to Palpatine at first. He was only supposed to be a Sith assassin. So there's different there's different grades of Sith as well, which kind of explains, Episode 9, where you go and you look and there's a whole bunch of Sith like filling these auditoriums and then fighting on behalf of Emperor Palpatine there. But dear God, let's not get into the sequels right now. Although I will say, Last Jedi still my favorite Star Wars movie. Let's see. NMI Trading says Star Wars has the opportunity for an awesome world building, but for some reason it feels like quality writers stay away from it. I wonder if it's just because it feels circular in types of storytelling. Yeah, they don't really want to try much of anything new, it seems. It's like they feel this constant need to recycle the old tropes. Nothing says that more than the sequel trilogy, because I think each of the directors in those cases was given a mandate basically saying, we are going to remake the original trilogy, essentially. We're just going to update it. We're going to have the older cast members, but essentially we're going to have the same movies as before. We're going to have A New Hope, which was The Force Awakens. We're going to have Empire Strikes Back, which was The Last Jedi. And we're going to have Return to the Jedi, which was The Rise of Skywalker. So that whole thing there was supposed to be really a repeat of the trilogy series, and it infuriated me because it was doing that. It's like, God, you've waited all this time to bring a Star Wars movie into existence, a new Star Wars trilogy into existence, and you're just going to shove the same repackaged stuff into my face? I mean, for God's sakes, Episode 7, end of the movie, you've got X-Wing fighters flying down a trench. Like, you even threw in a freaking trench. How unoriginal can you get? You've got this Star Killer base. It's just basically a souped up Death Star, and then you have X-wings having to fly down a trench to destroy it. It makes no sense. Well, I mean, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense if all you're trying to do is repackage the original trilogy and sell it as something new. I had no interest in seeing that, and I'm still grateful to Rian Johnson that he just basically said, I think I can get rid of this entire paradigm that we're being forced to work under. And so what he did, and I don't think people really understand what it was he was trying to do, is he took Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, smushed all those elements together, and subverted all of the expectations that were associated with those two films. And things like in Empire Strikes Back, the Rebel Alliance gets away scot-free from the Empire. That doesn't happen in The Last Jedi. The First Order is on the Resistance's ass the whole time. You have the stakes ratcheted up really high in The Last Jedi compared to Empire Strikes Back, because Empire Strikes Back, once the rebellion is free and clear and out of the picture, you've got the whole thing narrowed down onto this small cast of characters, and it's all about them at that point. It's almost like there's not a war going on anymore. So that kind of turned me off a little about Empire Strikes Back. It's just the fact that everything narrowed down to this small set of characters, and it was all about the pursuit of them, and really about the pursuit of Luke more than anything. I mean, they had the freaking princess in their hands, and they didn't really care. She was just bait to get to Luke. But in The Last Jedi, you were looking at the end of the Resistance. You were looking at, it's game over if this doesn't pan out somehow. You were expecting Poe to go through and do his flying and maneuvering out in space and whatnot in the middle of the movie. Nope. His X-Wing gets blown up along with a bunch of other stuff. There were just a whole bunch of times when things that you thought would come together would not come together. Things that you areas where you thought you knew where it was going, it just didn't go that way. And it was beautiful almost every time. I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, The Last Jedi. Definitely not a perfect movie, but at the same time, it's the one I can watch probably repeatedly without getting to a point where I'm feeling like, oh God, this part again. Because even the original Star Wars now, I cannot watch that movie without going crazy in the end scenes with the Death Star battle, because there are scenes in that Death Star battle where I'm watching it and I'm like, what are they doing? All they're doing is like shooting at things randomly, and then they finally find the trench, and then they go into the trench, and Luke's got, Vader and a TIE fighter on his ass, but he's got an X-wing or Y-wing guy behind him, and the guy's and he actually waves the guy off, saying, "Yeah, you better get out of here. There's nothing more you can do for me now." I'm like, he's a freaking human shield. That's his whole point. Let the guy die for you. That's basically what he's there for. But no, he just flies off. I'm like, this is dumb. This doesn't make any sense. Plus, you got proton torpedoes being sucked into an exhaust port. Okay, exhaust ports. The things that air and stuff blow out of. you know, I mean, I don't think Luke was deft enough of a force user that he could push two proton torpedoes down a shaft. Okay, he might have targeted them. Okay, but then they should not have been sucked down the shaft. They should have been blown away. That's what exhaust does. It blows out of the shaft. It's like, it just reminds me of that scene that at the very beginning of the movie The Martian. There's a scene in there. Well, actually, at the beginning, I don't know if it's at the beginning or towards the first portion, but he's describing all of the dangers that he's facing. And he's like, if this happens, then I lose that. And if this happens, then I run out of food. If this happens, then I get burned alive. Or this happens, and blah 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 blah. And then he talks about if there's a breach in the containment, and he says, and if this happens, then I pretty much implode. And I was like, implode? No, if you depressurize, you explode. And it even says that in the book. In the book, it says explode. But for some reason in the movie, it says implode. And I'm like, who changed that word? And why? Is it really something where somebody, a censor came in and said, I don't think we can keep our PG rating or whatever it was. I don't even know what the rating of The Martian was. Let me look that up real quick. Kind of curious. Martian 2015 film. It was PG-13. Okay, so I guess they probably had to change that word in order to keep their PG-13 rating. That's the only thing that I can think of. That for some reason the censor said, "Ooh, if people think he's going to explode at any moment, I don't know if we want to have that imagery in the film," which is just dumb. Because otherwise you've got actual adults looking at that saying implode. That makes no sense. But how did I get off into that? I don't even remember. So back to Star Wars. Okay, so we've got Ryan Johnson in The Last Jedi, and he basically smushed Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi together, so that at the end of that movie, you've got Kylo Ren set up as the irredeemable big bad of the next movie. You've got Rey set up as the protagonist. You've got, she's got the lore books of the Jedi with her, and then of course Leia's still alive and all this kind of stuff. And now they could go wherever they wanted to go. They didn't even have to make it a trilogy at that point. They could have expanded things all the way out into infinity if they wanted. They could have gone for episode 10, episode 11, episode 12. But no, the studio came down and said, well, we need to wrap this up. How are we going to do that now that we've got, all of this potential in front of us that could have taken us anywhere we wanted to go? And instead, they just wound up doing a Return of the Jedi clone that was god awful. So, yeah, I freaking Star Wars these days. The only thing that's been good out of Star Wars so far has been the Bad Batch, the cartoon series that's a spinoff from the Clone Wars, and the Mandalorian. By and large, the Mandalorian has been good. It's not the greatest thing, but I'll still keep watching that. But the Acolyte, dear heaven, I wonder how many of you watched that. Let's catch up a little here. NMI Trading Ray and I am Iron Man. I mean, all of the Jedi. Yeah, God, that line. Oh yeah, that was horrible. Um, WA asks, do you prefer the name Darth Teeth or Smilo Ren for that acolyte character? Apparently, his name is what, Kamir or Kyber or something like that. I don't remember what his name is because it just wasn't really important. Uh, Darth, Darth Teeth or Smilo Ren? Kamir. Okay. Huh. Yeah. I, I'm trying to think of what. So if anybody out there has not watched the Acolyte, basically what the Acolyte is about is, there is a pair of twins. One is a girl who is versed in the dark side of the Force, and she is on a rampage to kill a certain number of Jedi who were involved in the death of the witch coven in which she was raised. She also has a twin sister, and that twin sister was actually taken by the Jedi and raised as a Jedi for a while, and became a Padawan, but did not complete her training. She left the Jedi Order and now she's working as a mechanic. So when a Jedi is discovered dead at the hands of her sister, she, because she is the sister's twin, is taken into custody by the Jedi and initially accused of being the killer. But there are still Jedi around who were there at the slaughter of the witch coven, and they know basically that the girl is innocent, but they're hoping that the girl can lead them to her sister before the sister goes and makes the rounds and slaughters all the other Jedi who slaughtered her family. So it all tries to come down as this kind of mystery, and there's flashbacks to when the girls were young and the Jedi came to take them, and it's kind of blink and you'll miss it kind of revelations, because there's just no there. I mean, eight episodes, and there was really only one good episode in the batch, and that's because it was an absolute free for all lightsaber battle between the girls, the acolyte girl's master, who is a Sith Lord, or a, yeah, I guess he would be called the Sith Lord, and which kind of screws with continuity a little, because he's definitely not Darth Plagueis, although Darth Plagueis appears to make a showing in one of the episodes in this episode, although in this series, although he's like kind of hidden back in a cave or something. So maybe this was the first apprentice of Darth Plagueis before Palpatine came along. Maybe. I don't know. I don't even care. I mean, that's the problem. It's like they give you this series and they expect you to care about it when, number one, the acting is wooden as hell. There was no redeeming qualities about the acting in this show. Nobody blew me away as far as their performances went. As far as the action goes, I mean, I liked some of it. The fighting was generally pretty good, pretty well choreographed, but there was way too much predictability, and there was way too little in the ways of payoffs. There were times when I was just, wanting to scream at the screen for them to just tell me something. It was coming across like a Rippaverse book. Like, just freaking give me some story here. But it just never stuck the landing. And then when the series ends, you've got this reversal that takes place. Now the good sister is the bad sister, and the bad sister is the good and innocent sister because of a mind wipe and blah blah blah. And you you feel like, okay, and now the real story is about to begin or something, because you've already bored me to hell for 8 episodes. You can't do that. You realize you can't bore me to hell for 8 episodes and then expect me to be eagerly awaiting your next season. It just doesn't work that way. So yeah, I was not at all pleased, and nor was the revelation of the Sith Lord's identity anything to crow about. I mean, when you only leave one character who he could be, I'm not going to be surprised when it turns out to be that character. I'm sorry, I'm just not. I remember the first time that ever happened to me. I was reading a book by, I think the author's name was Chelsea Quinn Yarbrough, and she had a book called Beast Nights, and it was about a guy. It was about these two detectives who were hunting a serial killer who exhibited these animal qualities, as if the serial killer kind of morphed into a kind of werewolf or werebeast before killing his prey. And halfway through the book, you realize they're not introducing any characters who it could possibly be. And so you realize it must be one of the characters who have been already introduced. And if that's the case, well, it wasn't hard to pinpoint just who the killer was. And so there's that kind of whole, you've limited the playing field down to the point where I don't have any capacity to be surprised. You've only got one potential suspect who it could be. So yeah, the Acolyte fell on its face pretty bad. Now people were complaining that it was woke. I mean, when I first started watching the series, the only indication that there might be any wokeness to it was the fact that the girl was referred to as having two, or the mechanic girl was referred to as having two mothers. And I thought, oh, okay, well, here we go again. Because the last time I saw that was like America Chavez, but that's actually part of the comic book canon, so I wouldn't expect them to change that. But you're creating a whole new character here in this pair of twins, so why is it you're necessarily doing this whole women only thing in the coven? But that actually turns out to be part of the drama behind the series as well. Okay, let's see. NMI Trading says, how do you feel about mystery box storytelling? It's a well-known J.J. Abrams technique where they focus on the mystery setup and worry about how to answer the questions later. Remember Lost? How can I ever forget Lost? Yes, Lost. Goodness gracious. I don't know if I care for that, but at the same time, I don't know how many series I've watched that were actually written that way. Like, you're absolutely right. When Lost was on the air, there were many questions that still were left unanswered because they just ran out of places to put those answers. But for the most, and I'm just really surprised at how some people, like, if you've ever seen the series Death Note, you would think that manga had to have been plotted in advance. But from what I remember hearing about the artist, the writer and artist, who was working on that story, I think he was writing that thing week to week and, having to figure out, how am I going to get myself out of these things? So I don't know how many stories have actually used the mystery box technique, where you just basically set something up and hope to answer it later. I don't necessarily think that's the best way of doing things, because I know most mystery stories are written in such a way that you're kind of going backwards. It's like, okay, you know who the killer is. Here's how the detective is going to find out who the killer is. How do I get the detective towards those lines of evidence, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to kind of build those kinds of stories backwards. When you're dealing with something forward looking like a TV show like that, I don't know how well that could possibly work. Now it turned out working out really well for Lost, although there were, they did have their slow moments. I think probably season 3 was getting to be pretty wretched before they finally picked things up. But I don't know. I don't really know how I feel about that technique. I think I probably prefer the stories that are more structured in advance, just because you're not having to throw stuff together like George Lucas had to when he was doing Return of the Jedi. I mean, when George Lucas put all that stuff about, there is another Skywalker or things like that. It's like, well, who's that? It's like, well, we don't have any other characters for it to be, so I guess it's going to have to be Leia. Even the thing about Darth Vader being Luke's father, I swear, I don't know that was necessarily supposed to be part of Star Wars all the way through. I feel like it shouldn't have been. I feel like that's something that he threw in later. I mean, especially considering when Obi-Wan calls Darth Vader Darth in episode 4. Now, they had to actually retcon that in Obi-Wan Kenobi in order to make that make sense. Because at no other time throughout the series did you have a Sith Lord referred to by just as his title. So when Obi-Wan called Darth Vader Darth that first time, Darth was his first name. And then it wasn't until later that the Darth thing became a title. And I think that it wasn't until later that Darth Vader became Anakin Skywalker. I think George Lucas said, I could really do something with this, and threw it in. Oh, let's see. J.J. Abrams was a great writer. Well, I mean, I enjoyed Lost. Dramatic irony, I think, doesn't work as well for TV. Depends. I mean, I'm sure Breaking Bad was just full of dramatic irony, and I enjoyed that series immensely. NMI trading continues. I'm just so tired of the crap writing. That's why I love your channel, dude. I hope you get to write something soon for a project. Well, I have written a couple of short stories for a project that is, indefinitely pending right now. I mean, thankfully, because there's a third story that I need to write, and I'll probably start that probably this next week or so. I have a writing contest right now that I'm in that I'm going to need to write something in. And wow, my followers just might. I wonder if Ethan Van Sciver is doing something now. Is Trashcast on? Is that why my follower count just dropped from 6 to 2? I would not be surprised. What is going on? Because I know BTM Reviews is already doing something, and sure enough, I think Comic Artist Pro Secrets is right up there along with Prop XP Network, so everybody's jumping on that bandwagon, and honestly, I do not blame you. Apparently, there's been some new recent drama hit on account of Eric July having like a 2.5-hour interview with some couple of podcasters, and I don't know if he took some pot shots at Ethan or had taken some pot shots at them on the Saska sisters' behalf. That's just what I heard. It's the whole drama thing with Comicsgate now is kind of lost on me almost. I mean, I don't even see the value of it anymore. The only thing that I see the value in is just continuing to read what books I'm going to read out of the Rippaverse, and then setting it aside to read other things. I've got plenty of other things. For example, all the way from Australia. Look at this bad boy. It is Liam Gray's Dino King #1. Yep, all the way from Australia. This is the one that Ethan Van Sciver hyped up and all of a sudden he was getting like tens of thousands of dollars. It also came with this trading card here, and this is a nice trading card. I have to say, it's well done in the sense that the blurriness of the background art really makes the foreground art stand out. So kudos on the trading card there. But yeah, I'm gonna have to. God, the only thing that I wish I'd thought of in advance is I should have gotten 2 copies. I'm going to be really irritated with myself if I'm going to need an additional copy to tear up for scans. So we'll see how that goes. I know I've got 2 copies of Gooding on the way, and guess what? I don't know if any of you saw my my pleadings asking for help with the Kickstarter project Epiphany Engine. That is now fully funded. It actually will be produced. I was really thinking it wouldn't be. It was at the halfway point. It looked like it was not going to achieve the momentum it needed to finish, but it did cross the finish line. It crossed it like 2 days before the original deadline was going to expire. And so I went ahead and I had to create another Kickstarter account because for some reason Kickstarter does not allow you to back a project twice. And if you can't get the combination of things that you want with add-ons, then you have to order all of these things separately under separate IDs. And so I actually had to order a print copy of Epiphany Engine along with a digital copy of Epiphany Engine under 2 separate IDs. I just really wish that the creators of the campaign had the foresight to just let the digital edition be an add-on for any of the print editions, because I really hate having to disassemble a comic, if you know what I'm saying. It's not fun, and it doesn't do anything for resale value. Definitely not. So anyway, let's see what we got here. NMI Training, or I'm sorry, NMI Trading says, is there any way you could just summarize briefly what the beef is between Ethan Van Sciver and Eric July? I have no idea what the deal is. I actually have a video on that explains that pretty well. I forget what that video is called. It's in my Rippaverse playlist, so you might go back through and look for that. But in a nutshell, what the problem is that in the beginning, Eric July was coming out with the Rippaverse. Ethan Van Sciver was trying to be helpful, give advice, plug along, say attaboy, that kind of thing. And then he encountered Eric July's attitude about good criticism versus bad criticism, or valid criticism versus invalid criticism. And Eric July was spouting this nonsense about how you did not need to take the criticism of people who do not like you. And Ethan Van Sciver's reaction to that was, no, some of these people who don't like you might be supremely qualified to criticize your book and give you good advice on it. And if you take their advice, your work will improve. And so they started to butt heads over that philosophical difference, to the point where when Dick Masterson came out and made a critique of Eric July's I Saw #1, Ethan Van Sciver supported that critique, and Eric July got really pissed over that. And so at one point, Eric July sent Ethan a text, and this is what Ethan calls the night letter, that basically said, look, I don't want you promoting people who are just bad-mouthing me, because I know there are people out there willing to badmouth you, and, I could always have them on my show, but I've chosen not to do that. But, if you don't show me the same respect, then I might. And so Ethan took that as a threat. And for a while, he kept quiet while it just kind of, roiled inside of him because he didn't like being squelched like that. And so eventually, Ethan, revealed the text uh, and basically accused Eric July of threatening him into silence uh, over ISOM number 1 and number 2 and what have you. And at that point, there was a rift between the two, and it's pretty much an uncrossable rift at this point because I think they're just way too devoted to their own points of view. Uh, and now you have people falling into camps, like, for example, Yellow Flash would be one who apparently has fallen into the Eric July camp, and on that account turned against Ethan to the point of revealing, the cover page rate that Ethan was willing to do for Yellow Flash at one point, which was just a huge slap in the face business wise. So now, in response, Ethan has, developed his Trash Cast podcast, and now he's doing that in opposition to Yellow Flash to kind of bleed some of Yellow Flash's audience away and just to basically out-succeed them and then hopefully out-succeed them both. So that's, in a nutshell, that's basically what happened, is that there was a philosophical difference about taking criticism. Ethan's view was more like, listen to the people who hate you just as much as you listen to the people who love you, because the people who love you may not be qualified to criticize your books at all, and they might just tell you what you want to hear. Whereas the people who hate you and are actually pointing out valid flaws in your books, they can help you. They use their advice to improve your book, and therefore, you'll prosper even more at their expense, because they've done all this work to actually help you improve. So yeah, that's pretty much where that comes from. Okay, so it looks like Ethan Van Sciver has taken all of my thunder. I'm going to go ahead and close this one down, and I will talk to you all later. Thanks. Please subscribe. I do have an organization for Biff Bam Boom Comics to of their book, The Naturalites. I will be looking at that book in the near future, and then we'll see what happens. I think Gooding the Polymath is actually coming out next week, isn't it? I think the 24th is when that's supposed to start shipping, and I was one of the earlier buys on that. So I'm just going to go ahead and log off for now, and I will talk to y'all later.